How is everyone doing so far this morning? Doing well. I don't know about you. I've learned a lot so far. Anybody else? Yeah. This has really been some great learning. And you know what? Now we're going to unlearn it all. We're going to wipe the slate clean. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. But we're going to talk about a topic that's come up a couple times. It came up with Sanjeev's introduction this morning about leadership, how we need to lead differently to enable the outcomes we're looking for with agility, right? And so thinking about the state of agility today, we are seeing that leadership is still cited as one of the biggest impediments. This slide is actually from the Business Agility report that was done in 2023. So looking at two of the biggest challenges to agile transformation are the ability to lead change and just in general leadership and management capabilities, right? And there's a lot of this feeling of do as I say, not as I do, et cetera. And I think also in the State of Agile report that came out, the 17th State of Agile report, it was similar. They were talking a little bit about how the satisfaction in Agile adoption went from 72% in 2022 to 59% in 2023. And there were several reasons for that. Two things that were cited were, and about 40% of respondents pointed to leadership, the ability to lead change, and management capabilities, right? So definitely we've got some work to do here. And curious to know, how many of you have been working in Agile agility for 5 years or more? Cool. And keep your hands up if it's 10 years. 15? Yeah, all right, so we got some experience in the room, right? And so what I want us to think about here is, where are we impeding agility? So I'm gonna give you a chance to talk for a few minutes with each other. Bonus points if you get up and talk to somebody you don't know. I'm gonna give us probably about 5 minutes to talk about some examples that you have where leaders and leadership behaviors have impeded agility. And you get special bonus points if the example is about you and your own leadership. All right, I'm going to bring our attention back here up front. Cool. Seemed like there were some lively discussions going on. I'm curious, does anyone want to share an example that they came up with?
We get that buy-in for them as leaders, where they're the ones that are pushing back, and they're right there with the teams. Mm-hmm. And how do you get them to join you and to understand what it is the Scrum Masters are trying to do, what we're trying to do as an APMO, and they push back, and we get the resistance there.
Okay, so the resistance from the middle or the middle? Okay.
From the middle, yep.
Okay. What else? Yeah, Tony.
So I wanted the extra bonus points. I'll share mine.
I love it.
So I've been in Agile space for over 15 years now. This gentleman here has been a hero of mine, but he goes to his head. We can't say that too much. But what I've done is I've lost patience. And I was SVP at a very, very large bank that owned the ATM space that at that time had the largest ATM space in the world, more ATMs than all the other banks combined. And we were implementing Agile, and we were going really, really well at it. But there's times where I just got tired from all the pressures as being an SVP, getting everything in, where I'm going to my team, just do it. You know, yeah. And then after that, going back to my team, apologizing, and trying to say, you know that's not me, and I'm sorry. And they ignored me. They knew me. That was the only wonderful thing, that they knew me well enough that they were like going, yeah. He'll come back and he'll come to his senses. But at that moment, there was nothing agile about me.
Yeah.
It was,
you
command
went right
and control.
Back into command and control.
Right,
yeah.
Command and control, perceived control, and which obviously they didn't do what I said, so it was perceived, right? They proved it, right? And I knew it was wrong. Okay.
Applause for Tony for sharing an example about himself. There's a lot there, some really great self-awareness there. And I'm assuming the story may have ultimately had a happy ending. So, yeah, so there you go. Excellent. So, and that's a great example. So we've got some situations, I think I heard some discussion about yeah, leaders just don't get it, or maybe they haven't been through the training and education, and it's more about, again, Agile and agility is something that's happening over there. It's not really I don't really need to be one to participate in it, so there's a little bit of that. But then there's even people who really buy into it, who really want this to happen, who live it, who are passionate about it. I include myself in that. I engage in behaviors that are actually counterintuitive to the outcomes that I'm trying to achieve, right? And so it's like, we're going to look a little bit about why we do this and maybe what we might do differently. And I think the other thing we've seen in the many years that have transpired since the Agile Manifesto, I think in the early days, we were talking about transformation in terms of leadership needs to buy in order to fund it, et cetera. It's really about looking at leadership as a strategic capability that you need to build throughout the organization. You need to build the muscle to continually adapt and change. So there's no way that you can do it without looking at leadership in a much different way, right? And so I'm going to bring in some wisdom here. Ultimately, there's a lot of things that we must unlearn that we have learned. I'll also conjecture, I think this is the oldest guy in the room at this point. So yeah, so let's look at, we really have to unlearn some things, some patterns of behavior, and it's very easy to underestimate that journey, right? It's easy to know it academically, I need to behave differently, I need to do X, Y, and Z. To actually do it is a totally different ballgame. I think about training for a marathon. You can know what you're supposed to do. I need to work out 4 times a week, I need to eat differently, I need a certain kind of shoes. But if you don't get out there and actually put in the miles and make the change, you're not going to cross the finish line, right? So it's really looking at knowing things versus converting this into behavior, capability, capacity, and impact. And so we're going to look really at what is this difference, right? Learning versus unlearning versus relearning. And from a neuroscience perspective, unlearning is much harder than learning, right? It's to unwire something and rewire is more difficult. We'll just do a quick example here. So I invite you all to just cross your arms in front of you. Yep. Okay. Now cross them with the other arm on top. How did that feel? Wrong. Not wrong. Yeah, different, weird. It was much slower from my perspective watching it happen, right? Because you're actually breaking a pattern. Another example I like to use is the process of driving. I think we all have experience driving, and we get to the point where it's second nature and we're doing a bunch of things that we probably shouldn't be doing while we're driving because it's so in our DNA. But then who's been to a country where they drive on the other side of the road? Yeah, and how does that feel, right? That is a complete process of, you have to unlearn those patterns and learn a new way, right? And you certainly can't, it's like the shoe-ha remodel, you're right back to shoe. You're right back to following the rules because you cannot rely on your instincts. So really taking something discarding something that you've previously learned and looking at a new way. Learning, I think we all know we're acquiring new skill, capability, et cetera, which is also very, very important. And I'd like to advocate for it as a journey of both, right? Relearning, I like to look at as maybe something that you've forgotten, so it's definitely different from learning or unlearning. I remember shortly post-pandemic, Agile DC of 2022, relearning how to give a talk in person. I need a clicker, I need all kinds of different backups for where my slides are, et cetera. I'm not just sitting here in front of a screen. It was amazing. Like I had done this many, many times, been a trainer, et cetera, but having to actually relearn that process. However, that is much easier, right, to do. And so this is from a talk that I do called 5 Things Leaders Need to Unlearn to Enable Agility. We're not going to go through all of that because of the time box we have today, but just to give an example of something that I know it's been an unlearning for me, and I think it is probably for a lot of leaders and organizations, is this notion that leaders have it all figured out. Suzette just told us that, right, in the last talk. Nobody has it all figured out. Does anybody here have it all figured out, though? Actually, before I... Oh, awesome, okay. So talk to John. Yes. But seriously, it's this, yeah, leaders have it all figured out. And when I think about myself and my own journey, I certainly bought into the belief that leaders are the experts and should have it figured out and do have it figured out. And I think about that all the way back from childhood and education and the reward systems that we have around being smart and knowing the answers, et cetera. And so I've really, and then what's happened to me more recently on my journey is, even though I'm unlearning that and seeing the power of creating space for other people to have the expertise, really to create an environment where we can exponentiate as opposed to grow linearly. The other thing I run up against is that there's still a belief broadly that leaders have it all figured out. And so I find myself grappling with my own insecurity as a leader of everybody expects me to know the answer, but I don't know the answer. So it's like looking at that pattern of, this is what I'm supposed to do. How do I break past that to know what I can do differently that's actually going to help, right? And so I ask you, how do you see this notion of expertise as an impediment to agility? Does anybody think this? Yeah, John.
I think that's, in some sense, the bane of our existence is the expert class. I mean, I love being an expert.
Yeah.
It's very narrow. Very, like you define your meaning by your expertise. It's not very broad.
Yeah, and nobody can possibly, and in the age of AI, it's even more impossible, right? And there's so many other sources we can pull from if we can let go of needing to be the experts ourselves, and again, let other people be smart, bring in other types of expertise. At IC Agile, we use the phrase, hire to elevate, not delegate. It's like we're bringing in more wisdom, right? And not that we as leaders shouldn't leverage our expertise at certain points, but being that the one with the answers, or letting people see you as the one with the answers, in my opinion, is a huge obstacle to the growth that we're all looking for. And so just a little bit of some tips here in terms of unlearning. As I mentioned, we talked about a couple examples. This is more difficult to do than learning something new because we already have a way of doing it, right? So they say the biggest impediment to learning is knowing. Thinking you already know something is a huge impediment to learning or unlearning it and learning something different. And so it's really looking at what is the belief that's really behind this. So I just did that with myself and the expertise. Is why do I believe that? What are the, and how does this show up? How does this impact my behaviors and habits? And noticing over the years how much better our outcomes are when I take a step back and let the true experts in whatever we're trying to create step in and shine. And so just noticing that. And to your point, Tony, when you were stressed out and you regressed back to command and control. When do I regress back to, I'm the one with the answer here, right? And then really decide what is true, what's the outcome you want, and what are some new behaviors and structures that can support you on that journey of learning, right? Looking at some tips and tricks there, looking at, this is where coaching can come into play, accountability partners, reflection, et cetera. So really developing what are some tools for unlearning. This has come up a bunch of times today, so I just wanted to give it a shout out. I think a lot of this does come back to mindset, and then also recognizing that it's not enough just to know that we need to shift our mindset. It is a continuous journey, right? And we look at the Agile mindset more as related to the growth mindset work that Carol Dweck did, kind of defining growth versus fixed mindset, needing to be in a space where you embrace uncertainty, you look at feedback as positive, you view failures for learning, right? I think, Jim, you had mentioned in one of your posts that the only failure is not learning from the disappointment, right? So it's really embracing this mindset and living it every day, and then looking at the toolkits as something that you would apply to a given context. One other model I'd like to mention here that you've probably heard about is the distinction between horizontal and vertical development. which is related to unlearning. So when we talk about horizontal development, it's about new skills, new knowledge, et cetera. So learning more about AI tools, learning a programming language, learning how to drive. Those could be new skills. And this is where we put most of our effort in learning and development in organizations. And there's a second type, which is this vertical development, which is really about looking at your meaning-making structures, increasing your capacity to deal with complexity, questioning your previous beliefs, et cetera. I know I'm just scratching the surface here, but roughly today there's about 10% of development put there. And this is, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, we've underestimated the journey and what it takes as humans for us to unlearn these behaviors and adopt ways of working that are more conducive to the outcomes we want. So it's really looking at this and how do we integrate this and think differently about learning and development. And with just a few minutes left, so this is one more that I do like to show. I won't go into as much detail here. This was a big one for me. This belief that you're either born with the charisma and what it takes to be the sage on the stage and the leader, or you're not, you know. And if you're not born that way, forget it, pick another path, right? And so that is really counter to, again, the growth mindset and what we need in organizations, because if we want, you know, adaptability, we want to change capability, we want to be customer-centric, the more people who can shine and develop their leadership abilities, the better off we're going to be. And so if you're limited by this belief, you're not going to be able to break through it. So it's really looking at that belief and developing your own authentic style as a leader. And I would love to give you all time, because again, these are a couple from my experience. In closing here, to take just a couple more minutes, could be with the same folks that you were talking with earlier. What would you like to unlearn or do differently in your own leadership? And how might you approach that? So I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to talk to each other again, and then we will close. So if I could have everyone's attention, again, it sounds like there's some great discussions going on. I'm just curious if anyone would like to share something they're going to try to unlearn. No pressure. Oh, yes, back here.
If you look at everybody here, the learning pattern we had during the past couple of the years, spending much of our time on those topics. The thing that I learned maybe about 3 years ago, there was a couple actually program. One of the interesting was in Harvard leadership program, which their focus was mostly non-technology by purpose into the leadership, into the human aspects of the coaching and the leadership at the organization. As we talk about the largest contributors to the actually anti-pattern is the leadership, right? So the tackle from that point is getting more into that leadership skills and undo whatever we had it from the technology and the process.
All right, thank you. And all right, so just encouraging you to consider what is possible when you unlearn, right? And that's it for me. I think we've got Naveen coming up next, so.